secure our border.
We're going to close our borders.
The biggest problem right now is the southern border.
And he's tried to handle the border from day one.
As the primary season rolls on ahead of the final showdown in November, immigration from the southern border is emerging as the key issue for voters in the United States. And the preliminary results of Super Tuesday exit polls conducted on March 5 by Edison Research were reflective of this phenomenon. Voters in Republican presidential primary contests in North Carolina, Virginia, and California appear particularly focused on immigration, with many even making it a deciding factor while casting their ballots, as per polls reported by Reuters. Feeling the pulse of the electorate, both the Democrat and Republican frontrunners President Joe Biden and ex-President Donald Trump have made what they call the border crisis a key point in their presidential campaign. As Trump closed in on the Republican presidential nomination with easy wins in the Super Tuesday primaries in 15 states and 1 territory, he used his public address to double down on the border issue.
But they come into our country, we're going to stop them. We're going to close our borders. We're going to have to deport a lot of people, a lot of bad people, because our countries can't live like this.
Texas and California were among the major victories for Trump over Republican contender Nikki Haley as he picked up support in every demographic, taking conservative southern states and more liberal battlegrounds, such as Virginia, one of his long-shot challenger's best chances. After Super Tuesday's election results, Trump is hoping to establish a commanding lead in the delegate count with 757 in his kitty so far, and vanquish his only Republican opponent, Haley, who has secured 62 delegates out of the 1,215 needed to win a nomination. Biden also swept almost all Democratic primary states on March 5, securing 839 delegates, losing 5 to others so far. He needs 1,968 delegates in his fold to bag the nomination. Last week, both Biden and Trump held dueling visits to the U.S.-Mexico border in Texas, a state which holds the largest land border with Mexico, days ahead of the Super Tuesday primaries, where the two leading presidential candidates seem to be in a competition with each other over who would pitch stricter anti-immigration measures to further militarize the border and restrict asylum.
This is a Biden invasion over the past 3 years. I call him Crooked Joe because he's crooked. He's a terrible president, the worst president our country's ever had, probably the most incompetent president we've ever had. But it's allowing thousands and thousands of people to come in from China, Iran, Yemen, the Congo, Syria, and a lot of other nations. Many nations are not very friendly to us.
Folks, it's real simple. It's time to act. It's long past time to act. I just received a briefing from the Border Patrol at the border, as well as Immigration and Enforcement, asylum officers, and they're all doing incredible work under really tough conditions. Really tough conditions. They told me what you already know and we already know. They desperately need more resources.
Biden even went to the extent of calling on his arch-rival Trump to join him in backing a bipartisan bill before Congress to secure the border.
Here's what I would say to Mr. Trump. Instead of playing politics with this issue, instead of telling members of Congress to block this legislation, join me, or I'll join you in telling the Congress to pass this bipartisan border security bill. We can do it together.
Immigration has been a political issue for quite some time, going back to 9/11. That's when a real shift took place in how the U.S. responded to the idea of this nation-state that is the United States, and how people on the move can or cannot access territory and protection on U.S. soil. A Reuters Ipsos poll from January 31, 2024 found rising concern among Americans about immigration, with 17% of respondents listing it as the most important problem facing the U.S. today, up sharply from 11% in December. There has reportedly been a spike in the number of migrants entering the U.S. through its Mexico border in recent years, especially during the presidency of Joe Biden, over which he has been cornered and attacked by the Republicans, especially his likely presidential contender Donald Trump. Recently, U.S. Border Patrol agents told CBS News that they recorded approximately 140,000 migrant apprehensions between official ports of entry along the U.S.-Mexico border last month, up from 124,000 in January, when unlawful crossings plunged. Another 50,000 migrants were processed at ports of entry, where the Biden administration is admitting those who use a controversial government mobile app to secure an appointment to enter the U.S. According to a 2023 report by the New York Times, there are now around 11 million undocumented immigrants inside the U.S., 3 times the number that lived here in 1990. The influx of migrants has strained the resources of cities such as New York, Chicago, and Denver, all Democrat-run places where Republican governors of southern states have pushed these undocumented migrants to as they were fleeing harsh social, political, and/or economic conditions.
De mi país, Ecuador, se encuentra al momento en un conflicto armado interno. Pandillas se quieren apoderar del país. Está complicada la situación. Guerra entre el ejército y contra las bandas delictivas. La razón principal que nos obligó a migrar de nuestro país.
The Republicans blame President Biden's immigration policies for the rise in the number of migrants who were fiercely prevented from entering the U.S. under the Trump administration, which adopted a zero-tolerance policy. Laws and practices such as family separation and Remain in Mexico of Title 42 were designed to keep people out, even those seeking asylum, which is a legal and internationally recognized right. According to a report by the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, Biden has eased the Trump-era crackdown on migrants, lifting the suspension of green card processing, halting construction of the U.S.-Mexico border wall, accelerating the reunification of migrant families, canceling safe third country agreements, etc. He has also introduced new parole policies, which allow certain migrants to enter legally for humanitarian reasons, and done away with the practice of detaining families since 2021. Although Biden took office in 2021 promising to reverse the hardline immigration policies of Trump, he has since toughened his own approach. Now Biden is reportedly considering a sweeping executive order to deny migrants the right to request asylum if they enter through unofficial ports of entry. The same authority was invoked by the Trump administration. The Biden administration has also held talks with officials from Mexico and Guatemala, which are major origin, transit, destination, and return routes for migrants seeking to enter the U.S. The trilateral talks in Washington held last month focused on the conditions that push people to migrate, including poverty, violence, and official graft. While under U.S. pressure to round up migrants inside their territories, both Mexico and Guatemala face their own trust issues with Washington over some of his policies. Meanwhile, Biden seems to be caught between a rock and a hard place, so far as the migrant issue is concerned. Electoral calculations demand that he adopt a stricter stance on immigration by limiting it. At the same time, he is facing a pushback from the migrant community in the U.S. for racial discrimination against non-European migrants attempting to get into the country. With Biden and Trump emerging as the likely nominated candidates from their respective parties for the November presidential elections, both leaders are likely to escalate their immigration rhetoric to woo voters. Amid the political tussle over who is more anti-immigrant, those wanting to live the so-called American dream will be waiting with bated breath.